Hey, how you doing, micro students? This is Jacob Clifford. Now, the AP test was 3 days ago. They've just released the free responses, so I'm going to give you my reaction and the answers. So here we go. I know what you're thinking. I'm sorry. It was my bad. Before we jump into it, let me mention 3 things. First, thank you so much for watching my videos. I've made some live streams this year. I hope they helped you guys get ready for the AP test. Number 2, if you want me to give a shout out to you or your school or your teacher, get together and send something to me in the mail. I made a video that talks about this. I'll do an unboxing video where I'll take that item and I'll talk about how it's related to economics, give you a shout out, and put it up on my wall. The AP test is over. You got nothing better to do. Get together, send me something in the mail, and I'll make that video as soon as I can. And number 3, if you're a teacher, take a look at my online or in-person workshops. It would be awesome to work with you in the summer. Okay, enough of that. Let's jump into the free responses for 2023. Here we go. Here's the first free response. I started off by asking you to draw a monopoly. It has you draw the price, the quantity, the average total cost showing profit, and label the deadweight loss. So 4 points for drawing that graph. And B tells you that the government wants to get involved and make it allocatively efficient. So what should they do? A ceiling, a floor, a per unit tax, or a lump sum tax. You never tax a monopoly. That's going to decrease the quantity. That doesn't work. Instead, a price ceiling is the right answer. No explanation required. Now in C, it says if all of a sudden this product has some issues and it makes people's vision go bad, what's going to happen to price and quantity? Well, the demand's going to fall, but more importantly, the marginal revenue is also going to fall. So the price, and more importantly, the question says the quantity is going to decrease because demand and marginal revenue shift to the left. Now that one wasn't explained, so make sure you fully explain the idea that people want to have good vision, demand falls, and marginal revenue falls. Now in D, they switch gears and start talking about the resource market. In I, it asks you to draw a market. Looks like this. This is wage and quantity, supply and demand, showing you the wage and the quantity equilibrium. And the next question tells you what's going to happen on the curve if there's more immigration. That would increase the supply of labor. The supply curve would shift to the right. Wage goes down, quantity goes up. D3, they give you some numbers. You have to use the least cost rule. So you set up the equation and then basically plug in the numbers and you find out the price of labor, the wage, is $200. I'll be honest, this was a relatively easy fair response. It asks you to draw the monopoly, and you're gonna get a lot of those points for drawing the correct graph. You're also gonna get the point for drawing the market, and that's awesome. But the other fair responses, those got a lot harder. I know what you're thinking. I'm sorry, it was my bad. In my predictions video, I told you it's very unlikely that we're gonna have a comparative advantage question, and what do you get? A comparative advantage question with terms of trade. They've never asked that on the micro free response, but this year they did. The strategy I gave you to set these comparative advantage questions up is to put it into a chart, and then you can figure out, and the answer to A is who has a comparative advantage. In wheat, it's Southland, and you had to explain with numbers. The reason why is because it only costs them 1/3 a cloth, whereas 1 wheat costs Northland 3 cloth. And I mean it, you had to use numbers. You couldn't just say, oh, because they're better at producing cloth or better at producing wheat. You couldn't do that. You had to use numbers to get the point here. And for B, they even ask you a terms of trade question. Identify a specific number of yards of cloth that can be traded for 10 bushels. So using our chart and the methods I gave you in my videos, you know that 1 cloth would be traded for 1 bushel. That's a terms of trade that would work for both, but you had to multiply that times 10. So 10 cloth for 10 bushels would work, or any number between 30 and 5. So there's multiple right answers here, but you couldn't say 1 cloth for 1 bushel. You had to say a certain number of cloth for 10 bushels. And for C, they continue to ask you another comparative advantage question. Southland's maximum possible of wheat falls from 100 down to 75. With this change, will Southland have a comparative advantage? And explain. Again, the best way to answer this one was to set up the chart and to tell them the answer is no, Southland does not have a comparative advantage because it costs them 3/2 of a wheat, where Northland, it costs them 1/3 of a wheat. So Northland has a comparative advantage because they still have a lower opportunity cost. Here in D, they switch gears entirely and start talking about negative externalities and turnips. And they say, okay, is the turnips with this negative externality producing the efficient quantity? Are they producing the allocatively efficient or socially optimal quantity? The answer is no, but you had to explain why. And you had to explain it with marginal analysis. So you couldn't just explain the idea of a negative externality. You had to say at the quantity in the free market, the marginal social cost is greater than the marginal social benefit, or we're overproducing turnips because there's additional cost to society. And in D2, they say if there's a lump sum tax on these turnips, is that going to affect price and quantity? The answer is no change. Price and quantity are not going to change in the short run because a lump sum tax doesn't affect the price or the quantity. I'm gonna be honest, that was a hard fit response. It's pulling from Unit 1 and Unit 6 concepts, and it's asking a ton of comparative advantage, and if you didn't practice it, it probably puts you in a bad situation. But the good news is a lot of other students didn't practice it either, so the points are gonna be really low on this, but that's not gonna hurt you because everyone probably got low points. Now here in question number 3, they give you the graph. We're talking about cost curves, perfect competition. This one was a lot easier. For the first one, they want you to calculate the fixed cost. The answer was 72. The way you got it was the difference between the average total cost and the average variable cost. That gives you the average fixed cost. And you gotta do it any given quantity, and you multiply that times the quantity. It's always gonna give you 72. It did ask you to show the numbers and show your work. So show your work and make sure you did that calculation. And in B, you maximize profit where MR equals MC. The price is set by the market, it's 14. The quantity is 6. In C, you had to give the profit, but in this case, they're making a loss because the average total cost is above the price. The loss is $42 loss, or you can say a negative $42 profit, but it's definitely a loss. The box is right here. And again, they ask you to show your work, so I hope you actually did the calculations for total revenue, total cost, total revenue minus total cost, gave you the profit. In D, they ask you what's gonna happen to the price in the long run, and they had you explain. So you had to say firms are gonna leave because firms are making a loss, supply is gonna shift to the left in the market, so the price is gonna go up in the long run. And in E, they switch over again to something completely different with cross price elasticity, saying it's positive, so these two goods are substitutes, and basically the price went up in D, so what's gonna happen to the quantity demanded for this other product? And the answer was increase. The reason why is because they're substitutes and they have a positive cross-price elasticity. This is a pretty standard free response question, so I think a lot of students are gonna do well on this. They might mess up on E, but hopefully you did really well. I hope you got the score that you wanted and you deserved, and I really appreciate you watching my videos and doing everything you've done this year to learn and love economics. Again, thank you so much for watching. Congratulations to you seniors who are graduating. You guys are awesome. Till next time.